Hello, welcome to the show. I'm Chris Smiley. I'll be your host today. Unfortunately, Mina Karbasi is sick and couldn't be here today, so I'll be sitting in, talking a little bit about the war in Afghanistan and my film that covers this topic. We're thinking about you, Mina. We hope you come back soon. I would like to thank Sajia so much for allowing me to come speak with you all today and to discuss this topic, which I feel so passionately about. I'd also like to thank Alif, who was very instrumental in setting up this TV network. His father is sick, and we're also thinking about him. So just a little bit about me, if you missed our show with Dr. Kamrani. I graduated from the University of Florida. I studied philosophy. I've been working in film and activism professionally. I think that education is the most important function of a society. So I first came to Los Angeles to work in inner city schools. I taught for a number of years, but I decided to really start getting involved with filmmaking. I believe that film is such a powerful medium that can change minds and create education across our entire country, and so that's what I've been doing as of late. I just finished a short film. It's called Disneyland of War, which we'll be getting into. It covers the glorification of warfare. I'm also finishing a feature-length film on the war in Afghanistan. It's called The War You Don't Know. Myself, I've always been against war. I find it such a an unbelievable concept for it to even exist. I mean, it's a really almost a cowardly concept when you think about it. You have these men that sit far away from the battlefield and send other young men to die for their needs, for whatever it is they want to do. But this war in Afghanistan became especially interesting and especially personal to me. One of my close friends was killed in Afghanistan. He was a soldier in the United States Army, and that's when I really started to question further into this. And okay, so the war is wrong, but why is it wrong? And when I started to really investigate this topic, it was so blatantly clear that this war was just like so many other wars in our history that was completely unjustified, had absolutely no reason to ever have happened, and the complete devastation that has occurred over the past 15 years, the longest war in American history, is just unbelievable. So I'll be showing a few clips from the film. I've been working on this for the past 3 years. It's something I've researched very intensively. I hope that you will be able to gain some insight and education from this film, and that you can educate others as to why this war is wrong, what is wrong about it, and how we can avoid any further bloodshed. So I'm going to play just a quick clip from the film. And again, Sajia, thank you so much for having me here. And Sajia does such a great job. She's such a passionate woman, and we're so pleased to be able to have that sort of perspective, a female Afghan voice to speak out against the war and the injustices that occur in Afghanistan and around the world. And I'm very proud to be working at this station with Sajia. Thank you so much, Sajia. So this first clip is just a little brief intro about the film. Listen carefully to the news commentator as he discusses the war. This clip has George W. Bush in September of 2001, as well as this newscaster in 2001, and it's very, very interesting. So listen carefully to this part.
Good afternoon. On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime
They're
in
not going
Afghanistan.
to have to explain to the American people is why we got into this. You know, we spent most of that 10 years we were involved in Vietnam saying, now explain to me again why it is we need to be in Vietnam. During the Somalia thing, why is it we are here? Americans know why we are embarking on this, because innocent Americans, any one of us could have been in one of those buildings, any one of us might have been on one of those airplanes. Innocent Americans were cut down without warning on American soil. So the reason we are embarking on this, in this particular one, Dan, I think will require no explanation.
This was supposed to be the right war.
I opposed going to war in Iraq.
I was strongly supportive of Afghanistan.
Now is the time for a responsible redeployment. I will send at least 2 additional combat brigades to Afghanistan. This is a war we have to win.
So, unlike Iraq, Afghanistan has always been viewed as the right war, the war we should have been in. And even to this day, it's kind of gotten into this concept of, okay, well, it was the right war, but things just didn't turn out right. It didn't go the way as planned, and now we should get out. But what I try to portray in this film is that this was never the right war, that we never should have been there in the first place, that it was built upon a number of lies, and from day one, it should have never happened. So there's a few, we have to go back in time to really understand what happened, why we shouldn't have been there, what was really going on. So I'll play another clip right now. This is Phyllis Bennis. She's a highly respected in the peace movement as well as academia. She has a number of books published on politics and war.
In Afghanistan, too many people accepted this notion that we talked about earlier, the notion that this was a just war, this was a war of self-defense. That was the U.S. argument. It was the argument made to the United Nations, and the problem was that was never true.
Question for you in regard to Afghanistan.
Yes, sir. What's your question?
If the U.S. wouldn't go to war with Taliban government, they would be still in power, and Afghanistan would be in a very worse situation than it was, and it is now. Don't you think because of the terrorist attack on September 11, that makes the U.S. to go to war with Afghanistan? And it was better for the Afghanistan because Afghanistan got free from the fundamentalist Islamic terrorists of Taliban.
Yeah, definitely understand your question. So your question is,
Yeah.
the United States removing the Taliban was a positive thing? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And if they wouldn't go to war with Taliban, Afghanistan would be in a very worse situation than it is now.
Well, that's a very good question, sir. Thank you very much for your call. Let me get this other question to you. Afghanistan TV?
Hi, I have a question about, is this live?
Yes, you're live. Go ahead.
Hi, Chris. I have a question for you. As an American, what do you think about 9/11? Do you think it was done by the U.S. government involved, or it was done by the Saudi?
There is this, thank you very much for your call, sir, I appreciate it. There is this big debate within the activist community about 9/11. There is, I believe, something that we don't fully understand about it. There's the whole 9/11 truther movement. There's now this talk about Saudi Arabia's involvement. I mean, the 9/11 hijackers were all from either Saudi Arabia or Egypt. They were Arabs, and I think that's a fundamental misconception with the American public, is they don't understand a lot of the differences in the Middle East of where certain people come from, the vast differences between the Pashtun people and Arabs. As far as 9/11, I don't have I don't think I, as well as anyone else, has a full understanding of everyone that was involved. I think it is obvious of Al Qaeda's role in this, and that's what's most important. Let me address the other gentleman's concern, and we'll also get into this question about 9/11 responsibility. So the fact that the Taliban regime was removed from Afghanistan. Of course, when I say that we shouldn't have gone to war, that this war is wrong, and that the resistance to the American occupation is justified, that doesn't mean that I also believe that the Taliban regime is worthy of being empowered, that they're good. Of course, they've been a horrible regime for Afghanistan. Their own oppression has been just as terrible, but the most important thing to understand is that a country deserves its own self-determination. You know, I absolutely despise all of our politicians in Washington. I know that they don't have our interest in hand, that they are creating an oppressive regime here in the United States. But I don't want Russia or China to come invade my country to put in some power what they think is right, or to control our political sphere. I want Americans to rise up, become educated, and to determine where we should go ourselves. It's never ever going to work where you have an outside force coming in to try to dictate what's happening. There will never ever be peace that way. The Taliban has clearly stated what they're opposed to, that they will fight to the last man to resist this occupation. In Afghanistan, people have shown that over the course of history, that they will suffer tremendous losses and bloodshed to resist foreign occupiers. Now, of course, you know, what may happen after that might not be what you want or what is good, but it needs to be the Afghan people that determines what happens. I'm going to play a clip from Richard Falk. He was a special representative to the United Nations, and he talked about the importance of the right to self-determination and why this is so important.
And regime change, to begin with, is a fundamental violation of the right of self-determination, which had been thought to be the primary basis for legitimate government in the post-colonial world, where peoples have an entitlement to determine their own future. And you may not like what that ends up being, but it seems preferable to having people sitting in capitals such as Washington, and at one time Moscow, deciding what's good for other countries and using their military machine to achieve that result.
So that was Richard Falk. I interviewed him last year for this film. A lot of very good insight he was able to provide. But as I was saying, you know, we know that the Taliban regime is not what Afghanistan needs, and I am in no way justifying what they do in their resistance. But the fact that they are resisting is justified, and it's important to understand this concept of self-determination and how important that is for a people and a nation. I also want to get back to the other gentleman's question about 9/11. I'm only going to do a short 30-minute show today, but over the next few weeks I'm going to go, there's just so much information about this subject that needs to be understood, and we'll go piece by piece back in time. There's so many important little things that I've uncovered that need to be understood to fully be able to talk about this subject. But what the gentleman was talking about was 9/11. So 9/11 was a terrorist attack perpetrated by Al Qaeda. What I think most Americans don't really understand is the differentiations between Al Qaeda, Taliban, Afghans. let me play a little short clip. I interviewed Ali Jalali. He was the former interior minister of Afghanistan, and this is what he had to say.
The 18 people who were involved in the attack on the United States, neither one was an Afghan, nor they were doing it or they were inspired in doing this by anything related to Afghan politics. So it was an international terrorist organization based in a weak country.
So why did we get to bomb Afghanistan?
So Mr. Jalali stated something that's very important, and I think that most Americans never even thought to question back in 2001 or even to this day the difference, one, between Al-Qaeda and Afghans or Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda is an internationally based organization. It's made up of Saudis, Egyptians, Arabs, and the Arab people are fundamentally different from the people that make up Afghanistan. They don't even speak the same language. And I think that's something that Americans certainly don't really have a firm understanding of, and it's very important to understand these differences, and because we're talking about going to war and holding a whole nation accountable for the actions of one international terrorist organization. Al-Qaeda was trained in Germany, the United States they were trained in. They were supported by Saudi money. So to hold the whole country of Afghanistan responsible for the actions of a criminal organization is just wrong. But there's certainly far more to understand about Al-Qaeda and their relationship. Now, a lot of our politicians will try to hold the Taliban regime accountable for their support of Al-Qaeda. Now, this relationship between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban goes way back into the Soviet War. In fact, the United States had somewhat of a relationship with Al-Qaeda, though not directly, very indirectly. They were all together on the same side in resisting the Soviet occupation. I have a very, let's take this phone call. Afghanistan TV? Hello? This is Chris Smiley. You're live on Afghanistan TV. Do you have a question, sir?
Just I have to ask you from London. Maybe I have also a question.
Okay, what's your question?
Your question I will ask her. I always on our line continuously for the last few years. We ask a question, she gives me very politely, very nicely, knowledgeable answer.
Okay.
Very impressive of her, this program.
Okay, do you have a question?
Yes.
The terms of self-defense in the UN Charter, Article 51 of the UN Charter, speaks about the right of nations to self-defense. If you've been attacked, you have the right to self-defense, but it's not an indefinite right that you can do whatever you want against whomever you want for as long as you want with whatever weapons you want forever because you claim you were attacked.
Okay, I believe our technical difficulty was fixed. We should be all set with our live broadcast.
The terms of self-defense in the UN Charter.
So I was just discussing some of the fundamental concepts about the occupation and why we need to understand the full history around this. So what Phyllis Bennis was just speaking about is the United States government taking advantage of this situation of 9/11 to essentially have a perpetual warfare around the world in a number of nations, Iraq, Syria, Yemen. Now we're allowed to just go to war without official declarations from our Congress, which is in our Constitution, which we're obligated to do so. And essentially to conduct these operations under these veils of lies and secrecy. We'll go ahead and take a phone call. Afghanistan TV.
Veils of lies and secrecy.
Afghanistan TV, do you have a question? Yes, sir.
May I call you Chris?
Yes, sir. How are you?
Yes. Oh, hold on, let me turn off my TV. Thank
Yes.
you.
Please.
Okay, Chris, I have a point. I have a question, and I would like to, first of all, as an Afghan, I would like to, with whole my heart, from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to thank America for its B-22 bombers to take Afghanistan from the stomach of Pakistan. That's first. Second of all, we'd like to know you, Mr. Smiley, correct? That please introduce yourself. Who are you, and where you from, and your education, and this and that, because we don't know who we are talking to. And third one, last but not least, do you understand my English? Because English is my second language.
Oh, no, very well. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And the third one, what if, hypothetically speaking, what if the United States leave the thing, Afghanistan, and then what's going to happen to my people? Because last time, Russia left, and we had a communist government, and there are some people called Mujahideen, but they came and destroyed Afghanistan and fighting and killing and this and that. Those things that you're talking about, and people, the left, talk about it. That's one thing, the liberals, whatever they call themselves. But let's talk about, now it's happened, America is there, So what's going to happen when America leaves? Okay?
Right.
It's, repeat again, my friend.
Yeah.
First, I thank America for helping us, to rescue us from Pakistan. Second, please introduce yourself. What a coincidence. How you and Mrs. Kamrani meet each other, think I'll talk about these things. And third one is what's going to happen to Afghanistan if the United States leaves.
Okay.
I thank
Very good
you,
question.
and I wish you a beautiful day.
Thank you very much, sir.
Bye.
Well, if you didn't catch the introduction at the beginning, I'll just briefly go over it. I'm a filmmaker. I do a lot of activism, but just to go back, I graduated from the University of Florida. I studied philosophy. I came to Los Angeles to work in public education as part of education reform efforts. I always believed that education is the most important aspect of society, and I had always been interested in filmmaking and the power that video media can have, especially in today's world. So I've been doing film work for a number of years now. I have a couple of films that just came out recently. If you go to my website, which is on the bottom of the screen, you can see some of my work. This film that I've been working on for about 3 years now, about the war in Afghanistan. I've interviewed a number of people. I really wanted to cover the political side, the real fundamental questions about this war. So, I didn't, I'm not showing a lot of the warfare and what happened in this city or this city. What I really covered was a lot of the beginning and a lot of what was really happening and why this did happen and what the United States was really trying to do. So that's what I try to answer with this film is, was this war justified? That's the key question. As far as Sajia, I met Sajia through Dr. Kamrani. I had interviewed him for this documentary on the war in Afghanistan, and he was very instrumental in helping me and connecting me with certain people with the film, and I was really loving the work that Sajia was doing. She does a lot of charitable work, and I'm very thankful to have met her, and then I started to help her with this new TV network. I was so excited that she was going to go do this venture because she is really bringing something very powerful and unique, I believe, to the world, and so that's how I came here with the network, and I'm so thankful that she gave me this opportunity. As far as your question, this is a very important question. We kind of touched on it earlier about what's going to happen if the United States leaves. I know this is a very concerning aspect for some Afghans who are worried about the Taliban. But the most important thing to understand is the concept of self-determination. I mentioned this earlier that I absolutely hate what our government does and how oppressive the United States government is towards its people and peoples around the world. But I don't want Russia or China or some foreign nation to come invade occupy and put in a government they see fit and support a government they think will be the best for me and Americans. It's up to Americans to educate themselves, to rise up, to create a government for ourselves. So, what might happen after? We don't know. That's up to the Afghan people to decide. But we do know what will happen if the United States stays. It'll just be continual warfare. The Taliban has shown that they will suffer enormous losses, that they will continue to resist and fight this occupation. As long as the United States is there will be continual bloodshed and warfare. So we have to have an end to this occupation. We have to have the Afghan people try to create their own system of justice, their own system of government. But I do understand, obviously, the concerns, of what might happen. We don't know, but we do know what will happen with the continued occupation. Okay, so we just have a few minutes left in the program. If there's any last calls, feel free to call in. I'll take maybe another phone call, and we'll just go over a couple more clips. But this is a very complicated and extensive topic, and something that I'll be going over the next few weeks, so that you can better understand, to talk with others about how you can help educate as to why this war is wrong. It's the title of my film is called "The War You Don't Know," because in the American consciousness, especially, this is something that most Americans have no idea is still happening. And, our government has been saying now since 2014 that the war's been over. Yet American soldiers are still there. They're still dying. Afghans are dying at an incredible number still to this day. So the war is far from over. And it's got to be one of the most least understood wars in American history, especially when you put it in context of how many people have been killed and how long it's been, 15 years now. So we'll be going over this the next few weeks. There's a lot of information I think that you'll find very shocking that I've uncovered. This is something I've worked on very intensively for 3 years now, and I'm excited to be able to share some of these things with you. Okay, so let's touch base on one other thing I wanted to get into. So, we went and we spoke with a number of regular Americans. We spoke with politicians, and just the lack of understanding of this war, even from congressmen. We spoke to a number of members of Congress, and the complete lack of understanding of what's happening in Afghanistan was really troublesome. And I'm going to show this clip now, and it's a little bit of a hyperbole. Some of these people obviously don't seem very well educated, but the typical responses are not far from what you'll see in this clip.
What do you guys think about the war in Afghanistan?
There's a war in Afghanistan?
Bobby! We're at war, and she goes, "There's a war going on? Really?"
Yeah.
And I just walked away.
Yeah. I just think that a lot of it is out of sight, out of mind. The media doesn't portray anything whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, technically the war has ended. They have ended the war, technically, if you talk to Congress. So
It's so ludicrous. And here, with the media not portraying the war, we still got kids over there. It's like it's a forgotten deal where they're going to continue to die. Nobody here is going to know. Nobody's going to give a rat's butt about it.
So I should have mentioned earlier that the family in that clip, they're a family of a soldier that was killed by an IED blast in Afghanistan, and what I learned from them was very, very insightful. I mean, they, because they experienced a personal loss, they felt this a lot more, I feel like, than most Americans, and they researched the war. Of course, they wanted to know why their son was killed. Was it for the right reasons? Should we have been there? And what that young lady was saying is, that the war is over. And in fact, what's so interesting is this clip wasn't shot. I didn't shoot this clip like last week or last month. I shot that clip, I think 2 or 3 years ago, 3 years ago when I started filming this. And that was when things were very heightened with the American soldiers and security forces. This was a little bit after the surge. And that week where I shot that clip with that interview with that lady on the street saying, well, the war is over, and that gentleman that in his bathing suit that said, well, what war in Afghanistan? 6 American soldiers were killed that week. I mean, God knows how many Afghans were killed as well, but 6 American soldiers killed that week in the war that they're saying that the war is over. So if the American public wasn't educated back then, when soldiers were dying at a much higher rate, it's very difficult to this day to expect Americans to care or to know about it. The coverage from the mainstream media networks has just been abysmal. It's been really, really depressing and frustrating to know that there's this chaos and destruction in Afghanistan caused by our government, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody even knows about it. It's something that's very, very heartbreaking, especially for families like you saw. That's the Dorte family, and I respect them so much, and I'm so glad that they were able to contribute to this film and show a little bit of the impact of the war on them and what they thought about our government and how this war is being conducted. There's we'll touch on this last concept before I get out of here. Not only is there just a complete lack of awareness and understanding from the American public, but our culture is deeply rooted in support of warfare and extreme patriotism, to the point where if you don't accept what our government is doing, it's unpatriotic. No matter what they do, there's a section of our population that will criticize you and scream at you if you try to discount anything that our government does. It's seen as so unpatriotic. We have this huge propaganda machine from our government that just tries to just pound this idea of support your country, support the flag, support America. But there's a difference between supporting America, which is a very vague concept. There's a very big difference between supporting, my friends and neighbors and family, all of America, versus these few criminals in Washington, D.C. that are running our government. That's not America. Those are a few individuals, and they're certainly able to make mistakes, and they certainly have not only made mistakes but horrible decisions that have affected so many people. I have a short film that is actually being released next week. It's called Disneyland of War. What this short film covers, we went to the Miramar Military Air Show. For those of you in America, you might have gone to one of these when you were a kid. You go out there to the military base. They have planes flying overhead. They have a lot of the weaponry out. You can go and play with guns. It's a very carnival-like atmosphere. That's why I call it Disneyland of War. It's it's almost like a theme park for warfare, and it was so disturbing. Some of the things we saw and the concept of promoting warfare to children, that was what was really disturbing. Is not only you have adults there, they can make their own decisions, but when you have so many kids there, and it's an environment built for kids, where you had snow cone machines and stickers and face paint, to try to indoctrinate children to support violence. It was very disturbing. So what this film covers is this glorification of warfare in American culture. And I was fortunate to have Mike Haynes, who's an Iraq War veteran. He went out there and produced this with me as the narrator to try to explain this, and he gave a very powerful perspective. He's a former military veteran, combat veteran from Iraq, who now is a peace activist. And he speaks out against warfare and injustice. And I'll play a short clip. This is a trailer from the film, and next week you'll be able to see the film. It'll be on my Facebook, and I'll also be talking about it in the upcoming shows. But here's a clip.
Hi, my name's Mike Haynes. I am a Marine Corps veteran, 8.5 years, and I'm a combat veteran from the Iraq War and a member of San Diego Veterans for Peace. Every year here in San Diego, there's an air show put on by the Marine Corps base here at Miramar. I, myself, being a combat veteran, was quite disturbed at what I saw. I felt like
So that's my short film coming out next week. It's a 20 minutes, so if you have time in your day, I hope you can watch it. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and you'll be able to see it. Just a short glimpse into that, I mean, you can see some of the very disturbing images of young children camoed up, geared up, playing with heavy machine guns. It was so disturbing for Mike, who was there. We went into this one area. Yeah, where we went to this one area. It was like a drone simulation. So the kids would go in there. They had these like computers set up, and the kids would go in there, put these headphones on, and pretend to call in airstrikes, and you would see it on the screen. They were essentially simulating a drone strike, like it was like a fun thing to do, and it was so disturbing for me and Mike that he had to leave. He couldn't even sit there and watch it anymore. It was so unnerving. So I really think that this film, and as well as the Afghanistan film, will help shed a lot of light onto some of these problems, and I hope that it can educate and help in some way. I really thank Saji for allowing me to take this time. After this show, Rashida will have a segment from her show coming up next, so stay tuned for that. You can catch me on Thursdays, 2 o'clock p.m. Pacific time after Dr. Kamrani. We'll continue to talk about the war in Afghanistan. I'll show more clips and more information from my film. We'll really get into it. I just want to kind of give a brief overview of some of the topics I'll be going over. But we'll really get into some very interesting and very specific things that I think will really blow your minds about this war. As well as this new film that I have coming out. We'll also get into that as well. So my name's Chris Smiley. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.